Now, the head of the Africa Finance Corporation, Zubairu, has highlighted the need for global collaboration that will support increased financing for Africa's massive infrastructure needs. Now, the AFC chief was speaking last week in New York in an interview chat alongside the director of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency chief, Eno Ebong. Let's listen.
I'll try to use an example of a case of how Africa is really pivotal to net zero and how Africa can work for itself and the rest of the world. So we are currently engaged on a transaction as lead developer for Lobito Rail. And that's a rail line between Zambia to Angola, and then from Angola to the port of Lobito. We're the lead developers on that stretch, and we're also financial advisors on the main Lobito line from DRC to the port of Lobito. Mm-hmm. Now, that is the copper belt. That is also significant forest cover for carbon credits and carbon markets. That is also significant agricultural potential, because Africa has 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. And we also have over, I would say, 39% of the world's minerals that are required for the energy transition. We also have 10,000 gigawatts of solar potential, 110 gigawatts of wind potential, 350 gigawatts of hydro potential, 15 gigawatts of geothermal potential, and 400 gigawatts of thermal gas potential. So we are currently embarking on decarbonizing a mining operation that is going to produce green copper. And we're doing that because we've expanded, the capacity of a mine from about 900,000 tons to over 1 million tons. Mm-hmm. And we've expanded the capacity to process the copper ores to concentrates. And we're building a smelter that will further transform that to copper anode. Why is this important? Because this is an example of how we can all work towards a viable energy transition. Mm-hmm. So in this operation, we've reactivated one of the Inga dams. So we're going to use hydropower to process the ores and the smelter. And that will reduce the amount of shipments from Africa to Asia, for processing. So most times when you see a ship of ores, it could be 50 to 70% of it is just waste. When you process in Africa at the source of the resource, you can capture and retain more value, create more jobs for this amazing population that I talked about, and also reduce the emissions that come from the shipping journeys. So when you focus on the African potential, mm-hmm. It means looking at how to get the resource that we have work better for Africa and the rest of the world.
The energy potential is a huge part of this, specifically on the infrastructure part, which we're talking about both physical and digital infrastructure here. And let me put this question to you because there was a recent estimate by the African Development Bank that the continent faces an annual infrastructure financing gap of $100 billion a year. Just put that into context for us. Does any other region or continent face that kind of gap? And what does that mean for the scale and the type of projects that aren't being built?
I think it's a really important question. I think it's the largest gap that we see in the world. So the focus does have to be laser. What it means is that there are many projects that do need to be scaled. I think that the point that I started with in terms of project preparation is key to that, but even that has to be scaled. To start a project, it's an extremely expensive and risky proposition. Lots of challenges even before a shovel is put into the ground, where developers are spending millions of dollars. It is hard when you're starting to find that capital. So agencies like ours provide grant funds to be able to kickstart that effort, but it needs to be scaled. It absolutely does, and you need to bring in partners along the way to do that. Not just project partners, That is key. Industry, government, private sector, both on the continent and in the United States. But you also need to bring in strategic partners. And for us, even though we're in at the early stages, this means financiers. So we work very hard to partner with 6 of the continent's major financiers. AFC is amongst them, and I'll just preview that there'll be a hint of another partnership that we're going to celebrate later on this afternoon. If you're not doing anything at 4 p.m. at the lot, please come and join us. But that kind of partnership is critical because you have to bring the financing, and the way to do that is to accelerate the project pipeline so that your partners are aware of what you're doing, you know what their interests are, and you can develop projects that are well suited, both in energy and in digital, which are huge parts of our portfolio as well.
I'll just say you can't drop a hint like that and not expect a journalist to follow up. So what more can you tell us about what this partnership might look like?
Actually, Samaila hinted at it also in describing the work that's being done very, very, I think, to the great benefit of all the stakeholders that he mentioned along the Lobito corridor. So absolutely related to that, I can say no more. You have to come and join us.
It's a tease if ever there was one. So Baila, talk a little bit more about this, the public-private partnership part of this. How crucial is that to making it work? And sometimes the concern is that, well, there's a dissemination of responsibility. No one really takes the lead. In the end, it's the people on the ground who need the benefit of these investments and projects. How do you look at the collaboration between public and private entities?
So, I mean, most infrastructure projects are public-private partnerships. And what is key is the risk allocation between the public and the private. There has to be an understanding that the public is supposed to provide certain goods, and if they cannot, they need to de-risk and enhance for the private sector to come. And what that typically means is you just need to honor the contract. You know, if we've agreed that this is going to be done, it needs to be done. And we need consistency in the framework for how things get done. Our approach has always been, we need to find the reasons to get things done, and we're focused on how they get done. So at AFC from inception, we're focused on project development, which is what she referred to as the key to unlocking the infrastructure opportunities that are on the continent, because the need doesn't really translate into a project. So we have to work together, and we've kind of assembled a team that allows us to develop to the risk opportunities and their examples. So for example, the government of Djibouti wanted to be 100% reliant on renewable energy. So we had a partnership with them. We built the development team. We de-risked the project. We invited FMO, which is the Dutch Development Finance Agency, Climate Investor One as well. And we put in place a construction finance instrument to build the plant. We commissioned the plant last year, and they have over 60 megawatts of electricity, and they are meeting, they have 60% of their energy requirements, and we're expanding that. So what is important is through innovative financing and through early stage de-risking capital, you're able to deliver a project at scale, even through the COVID pandemic. And that's an example.
If I may, what does innovative financing look like?
So it means focusing on outcomes, focusing on the parties that you're going to work with, and adapting the instruments to the requirements of the project. Yeah. So, I mean, it will be the same debt or equity, but you will introduce certain conditions to it that makes it more user-friendly. So that is really what we do. And because Africa doesn't have much capital, we need to find ways to first leverage the capital that is on the continent and then attract capital externally. I want to kind of focus on how we get more capital on the continent. So what is important is that we need to understand that Africa needs to own its development and it needs to finance its development. And we have to do that by working with the savings that we have. We have to work with our domestic savings. We need to find ways to capitalize our banks, capitalize our multilateral development banks, and find ways to unlock, savings from the pension funds to invest in infrastructure and in industry.